I'll start with like the policy piece, since that's the biggest. It's not my forte. Ashland is clearly the policy wonk here, but having the education piece around policy and then having that known, advocated for or against, um, at the highest level of sports transcends to collegiate sports and then youth sports, and the education piece around all things LGBTQ plus as it pertains to life and the magnifying glass that is sport. I think that's huge. So I would love to see coaches, executives lean into that. It's very educationally intensive element of policy.
Great. Ashland?
Yeah, in 5 years, I would love to see the participation rates between the LGBTQ youth actually increase and become a little more equal to what we're seeing when it comes to non-LGBTQ youth. I think ways that can happen, with what Josh was saying, is education around policies is also, I think we should also have the implementation of policies. Right now, a lot of national governing bodies don't have trans protection policies. And so in 5 years, it would be great to see a lot of national governing bodies of sports actually have a trans participation policy. And then some of these local parks and rec organizations having a non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ youth in general.
Great, specific examples. Hudson?
Yeah, for me, I think the one that I always keep coming back to is, like, so my coaches for me were always like father figures. They're like literally the most important people in my life, and they were central to my upbringing. And yet they were the least knowledgeable when it came to how to create an supportive environment for the LGBTQ community. And, I've had the opportunity to work alongside Ashland and Josh in so many different trainings and conversations. And, I'd say for me, at least, I like 9 times out of 10, when I get to talk to a room of coaches, it's the very first time there's been programming on LGBTQ respect and inclusion. Or if it is being offered, it's optional. So what ends up happening is the people who you want to be in the room never are. So, it's amazing for people to be here today, but I have a slight suspicion that you're already supportive and doing a lot of really the best practices that we've been talking about today. So in 5 years, I'd like to figure out, how do we reach those people who aren't a part of this conversation, who aren't participating in these webinars? And I think that only happens when we start to mandate that there is a certain level of cultural competency that coaches must achieve in order to be given that whistle and that clipboard to play that role in a young person's life. That's one thing I think I'd really like to see. And it's not only for the LGBTQ community, but it's for kids with differing abilities or different socioeconomic backgrounds. Like there's so many layers to what makes a person unique and special. And I think our coaches should be well equipped to support and embrace that full, quilt, or that full spectrum of who our young people are in sports. The other thing I would just say is I think we owe it to our young people to also be more intentional about how we create or how do we support our non-binary athletes. A lot of the choices that we make in language, in uniform, and how we interact with our athletes are pretty gendered in ways that they don't necessarily need to be. So I hope in 5 years we see more space being created for our non-binary athletes. I think the ways in which skirts are a part of uniforms are still pretty arbitrarily gendered. I think there's dress codes on teams. There's just ways in which we could be creating more intentional space for kids who exist in the broad spectrum of the LGBTQ community. And I think that would do a lot of good for sport as a whole.